Have the guts to follow your guts. Why playing it safe is the biggest risk of all. Written by Talmadge Spicer. Read by Talmadge Spicer. I've always been considered hard-headed because of my curious analytical nature. I have a natural tendency to hear advice and do whatever the hell I want anyway, and I love it. Being this way has been the cause to many unique experiences and taken me to places some people can only dream of. In this 9-chapter compilation of my most prominent lessons that I've learned, I show the reader what it means to truly have the guts to follow your guts. This is my first book and will always be very near and dear to my heart, as I am finally in a place where I'm sharing some of the parts of my experience that make me, me. Do I have all the answers? No. Do I have the guts to follow my guts? Absolutely. And after reading this book, you will too. At some point in our lives, we should all get fed up with thinking and fantasizing about how nice it would be to achieve our goals and just go for it. Here goes nothing. Chapter 1. Have the guts to tell the truth. People lie because they think it'll get them ahead. People lie because they think it'll help them avoid hardship. People lie because they want to protect their image. People lie because they're scared. People lie because they are terrified of the truth. You see, the truth comes with responsibility and accountability. This fear may never be overcome in many because it is never identified. People will live their entire lives proclaiming that they are not afraid of anything, but simultaneously be terrified of the truth. In this chapter, I hope to inspire you to have the guts to tell the truth. You are so hard-headed, my father would say in frustration. You must have to jump off the bridge to know there's water under it. And I was. I've been a curious person as long as I could remember, and this was problematic for me growing up. My military-minded father believed that people had one responsibility: to follow the laws of their authority. He was uninterested in exploring my explorative mind and analytical nature, and I constantly swerved outside of the laws and was routinely reprimanded for it. Why can't you just do what you were told? He would ask, defeated in getting me to conform to laws imposed on me. This caused serious internal conflict for me as a child. I mean, I didn't know why I was so curiously rebellious. All I knew is that when something caught my attention, it deserved an investigation. How else would I figure out what it was and how it worked? Getting caught doing things my father specifically told me not to do over and over again was not fun. In fact, the fear I felt of punishment would cause me to lie and say that I had not touched things when I obviously did. I would lie so passionately that I would begin to believe the lie myself. And of course, lying became the second offense and made the punishment even worse. The icing on the cake to believing my own lies was believing that I was being treated unfairly. As an adult, I can see how this was mentally a slippery slope. Feeling victimized and blaming law enforcement rather than realizing my own mind was behind the scenes pulling all the strings could not lead to anything positive. These experiences became so intense that I began contemplating suicide at a very young age. I mean, here I was getting punished for things I truly did not believe I did, and even if I did own up to doing it, I did not have a clue why I did it. I felt powerless to change the behavior. I felt like I was destined to continue the same loop of actions and punishments for as long as I could imagine. I remember thinking that running into traffic would be a good way to go because that way maybe God would see it as an accident and let me go to heaven. I went to Catholic school, and we were taught that if you commit suicide, you could not get into heaven because you never get the opportunity to ask for forgiveness for that sin. But this 7-year-old black kid was smarter than God, though. I remember writing a letter to my father with tears in my eyes about how I've been feeling and what I have been thinking about. I was ill-equipped to make sense of it on my own. It was a very tough thing for me to do as a child, but now looking back, I see how mature I was to seek help with my mental health. I do not think he took it lightly, but all I can remember is him suggesting that he hide the knives, to which I responded with a shrug. We never spoke of it again. Thoughts would arise here and there, but for some reason I cannot explain, It was the thought of my grandmother, Granny Ma, who would talk me down off the ledge. The thought of breaking her heart at the news of my death was enough to get me to dismiss suicide as an option. She is watching me write this book from heaven now, and I know she is very proud. The mischievousness and lying continued until I made a shift. I learned it was low-key entertaining to light fires and watch things burn. Do you remember when you discovered fire? I would light paper, dried leaves, sticks, or whatever I could find on fire for fun when I was bored. On this day, I was lighting tissue paper on fire and watched it burn in a glass jar in my room. Before getting caught, I had long thrown away the ashes and rinsed the jar, so I thought, we good. But there was one thing I forgot. When my father confronted me about the smell, naturally, I played dumb. What smell? He knew I had been lighting something on fire, but without proof, I thought I would win the battle. I always thought this way, innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. That is when he turned to my sister, Nia. Nia and I shared a room with a makeshift wall and a door my father put up because we were coming of age and needed our own space. The wall gave us visual privacy, but did not quite reach the ceiling, so sound and smell were still a shared experience in our rooms. After scolding me, he starts to yell at Nia for not snitching. She began to cry and feel bad for basically minding her own business. The combination of her tears and her innocence caused me to feel overcome with guilt. She had nothing to do with it. I stood up for her. It was me. I was the only one lighting paper. Leave her alone, I exclaimed. Almost immediately, he seemed to fade away as he disappeared into his room. I could not have been more than 7 or 8 years old, and although he was still angry and concerned when I spoke to him years later, he told me he left because he was proud. He was proud that I stood up for my sister and proud that I could finally tell the truth. What I learned was not to follow the rules. Thank God. What I learned is to take responsibility for my actions. This meant I was allowed to be who I was, as long as I was not lying about it. It did not mean, however, to do whatever I wanted. Instead, I learned to avoid doing things I feel I would need to lie about, or just take the consequences. From here on out, I was able to process the opportunity I had to be myself and live my truth as long as I was responsible for any damage that it may cause. I could now gauge whether pursuing something was worth it or not based on where I would be if it was effective versus if it blew up in my face. What I found is most of the time, whether things went according to plan or not, I always survived, recouped any loss, and had a new story to tell. No matter what, I gained a memory in which I could use to see the good or the bad. I think this is valuable to you as the reader because I find that most people would rather avoid the consequence than going for the gold. Not risking anything is the biggest risk of all. Why playing it safe is the biggest risk of all. You'll be complacent. You'll settle for less than you deserve. You'll begin to feel stuck. You cannot get to great if you're afraid to lose good. People who have not learned to take responsibility for what goes wrong in their lives have a hard time doing things to improve. As I see it, they feel they already have so much dysfunction in their lives that they're not responsible for. They think, why in the world would I do something that might make it even more complicated? And that's understandable. That is why their goal is to just be fine. If I'm fine, I may not be living to my highest potential, but I can try to be content with what I have. Sure, what I have is not the best or guaranteed to stay around, but if I do not do anything to lose what I have, at least it won't be my fault if I lose it. I can lose my home, belongings, or job security at any moment, but I won't think about that now because if it happens, someone else should clean the mess. I didn't make it. All people seem to care about is who is at fault. It's about time that we disassociate responsibility from fault. You see, there are plenty of things that are not your fault, but are your responsibility. At a young age, I was able to start taking responsibility for things I did not believe were my fault and gain the power to influence situations to my benefit. Yes, I was naive in thinking that the smoke smell that got my sister yelled at was not my fault. But I still like to submit to you that if you took responsibility more often, you too would uncover a role that you played in the outcome you were experiencing. For instance, where you were born was not your fault. Where you currently live is your responsibility. How you were raised is not your fault, but how you manage yourself is your responsibility. Your job not being as fulfilling as it once was is not your fault, but whether you stay or not is your responsibility. So much of our life is out of our control, but just as much of it can be under our influence if we choose to take responsibility for it. All of it. When you take responsibility, you become more equipped to take bigger risks because you know that you are the reason you are where you are and the only person who can take you where you want to go. It's not by chance, it's by choice. The choice to stay safe will also keep you stagnant, but the choice to take responsibility for the good, the bad, and the ugly in your life will allow you to influence parts of your life you would never have thought you had power over. The next time you want to blame your spouse, your friends, your family, or even your government for how you feel or your level of success, I want you to remember taking responsibility for these things and taking fault are two different things. Let's take fault out of the equation. I want you to think of responsibility as nothing more than your ability to respond. Confidence comes from execution. We all want to be confident and we all want to use that confidence to execute. The problem is we think we'll get the confidence before we commit to executing the actions that it takes to generate confidence. Confidence is what happens after you've tried the thing and got to see what's on the other side of it. Whether you win or lose, you survive and have the opportunity to try again. In a worst case scenario, you'll take what you've learned from your last attempt and apply it to future ones. Having done the thing and surviving it does something amazing to your confidence, as you know that you can do it better than before. If more of us realize that the worst thing we can do is wait to be perfect before we practice, the world would benefit so much more from beginners that actually have something to offer. By procrastinating practice for perfection, you also put off progress. Embracing your strengths and weaknesses in the name of progress towards your highest ideals is what it means to have the guts to tell the truth. Chapter 2. Have the guts to decide. Decision fatigue. One of the biggest things that separate the wealthiest of people from the poorest of people is their ability to decide. Powerful people make tough decisions quicker and more often than the powerless. The more time you spend making a decision, the less valuable that decision becomes. Why? Because when we procrastinate on our decision making, those decisions are less likely to be acted on. The biggest opportunities are the ones you should jump on right away. Decision fatigue affects those who get involved with too many minor situations. Not only do you want to avoid majoring in minor things, but you also want to work on your decision-making muscle by making a decision and doing so for yourself. If you're living by the advice of others, you're creating fertile soil for seeds of regret to bloom into a garden that is a life unfulfilled. One of the biggest decisions I've had to make was in 2008. What was I going to do after high school? My options were college or the military. I had recently watched a documentary called Fahrenheit 9/11, which convinced me, despite having a heavy military influence in my family, that the military was not where I wanted to be. So the only other foreseeable option was college. But where? My dream school was William Patterson University. I even partied with them while I was in high school and thought I had a surefire chance of getting in. But after applying to a few universities, my choices dwindled down to Fairleigh Dickinson University in Teaneck, New Jersey, or Herkimer Community College in upstate New York. I was accepted into Fairleigh Dickinson University, but my father wanted me to go to Herkimer. My uncle Stephen, an educator in upstate New York, offered me room and board to attend the 2-year college, where tuition was significantly less than that of the 4-year university I had my heart set on. But I was far more attracted to getting out on my own. At Fairleigh Dickinson, I would have a chance to be more independent, experience a 4-year university, and even join Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. What did I do? I turned down the free ride to the JUCO and followed my gut to FDU. Financing this decision would have been an issue if it weren't for my grandmother, Dolores Ardell Spicer, to whom this book is dedicated. If it had not been for her co-signing on my student loans, I would have been a Herkimer general for sure. While at Fairleigh Dickinson, I studied business marketing. I was very active on campus through various organizations and even reactivated the Tall Mu chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity. And even though this was a decision that eventually buried me in over $150,000 in student debt for a degree that I'm 15 credits shy of, I am grateful. I learned so much about business, marketing, sales, and psychology from the Silberman School of Business that I'm confident in my ability to run a profitable organization. I received firsthand experience in running organizations as a student leader that served on multiple executive boards on campus. I was mentored by outstanding Black men who accepted me as the lone dog who would reactivate Tall Mu on the yard. This in turn put me in a position to mentor those who sought membership into the greatest fraternity on earth post spring 2010. Even though some of you may have squirmed reading the amount of debt I accrued at Fairleigh Dickinson, I'm grateful for that too. Without the loans, I would not have been motivated to start a business and become financially literate. As I saw it, there was no way for me to ever pay Sally Mae $150,000 in my lifetime and also live a fulfilling life. My options were work a job I hate to make $4,000 monthly student loan payments and live off of the remaining scraps, or I could start a business and at least give myself a chance to live a life worth living and not be enslaved to my debt. If it had not been for my decision to take out those loans, we would not be having this conversation. This is the decision that sparked the journey that gave me the many experiences that I plan to provide to you as the value in this book. See, when you're making a huge decision, you must realize that the option that you do not choose can never be a factor in the experiences you're having. For example, I cannot tell you what would have happened had I gone to Herkimer. I cannot tell you what life would be like had I sacrificed all of the experiences I received from my decision to go to Fairleigh Dickinson, including taking on this tremendous amount of debt. I can, however, guess, and that is what people tend to do. They guess what life could have been had they been a different person making a different decision at a specific time. But it does us no good to wish we had done it differently, because we did not do it differently. It is the past, and there's no changing that. Once you make a decision, you send yourself off in a certain direction. And failure to have a direction is failure to move at all. And when you stand still, so will everything around you. The ability to decide is one of the strongest superpowers you have. Honing this skill can be the reason you design your life custom to your imagination. The inability to decide will render you powerless, and you will be at the mercy of other people's designing your life for you. Failure to choose one of your options, no matter how many there are, is the decision to have nothing. If you want to make your dreams a reality, you must have the guts to decide. Chapter 3. Have the guts to take the opportunity. The problem is not that there aren't enough opportunities. The problem is that we hesitate to take the opportunity that forces us to change and grow. Opportunities, especially in America, are abundant. And if they do not come knocking, you have the ability to build your own door. The people who seem to have all of the opportunities are the same people who were not afraid to take opportunities, because these are the people who know what they want. Without a clear vision, opportunities may seem scarce or non-existent. But when you are convinced that what you want is not only available, but it is for you and will not miss you, you no longer look for opportunities. You become the opportunity. We have an opening in Idaho. You going or not? Asked Chevy, my mentor. He asked if I would pack up all of my belongings and move across the country to become a business owner and pay off my debt. I hesitated. But how did we get here? Let's back up to December 2013. I'm still attending Fairleigh Dickinson University, but I'm slowly coming to the realization that this will not work out according to plan. Between my dwindling passion for my classes and my financial aid running out, I began experiencing anxiety. This not only prevented me from getting good grades, but it was also the spark that I needed to start paying attention to my mental health. I visited the campus psychiatrist. He told me that I was indeed anxious because I was unsure of my future. He was right. I did not have a plan at all. I had no reason to get my degree. Don't get me wrong, I wanted one, but I did not have any emotional attachment to getting one. In fact, the only motivation that I had was seeing my grandma's name co signed on those loans. I had to figure it out. I decided that school was not for me. I needed to take a new approach to this thing we call life. Coming from a long line of employees, my first instinct was to get a job. But this time, I need to think longer. Whatever job I got, it was not just about a paycheck. It needed to be something I excelled at. This is the moment I began to become conscious of personal development. I was hired as a representative for T-Mobile at a kiosk at Menlo Mall in Edison, New Jersey. And for the first time in my life, it was important for me to make a good impression, not only during the interview, but also on the job. I guess something told me that I already needed to be successful to become successful. That means I actually read the training manual from front to back. I was taking this seriously. I felt like I had just come back from a major failure, and this job was not going to be a repeat of that. The first month of working at T Mobile was considered training only. That meant I was allowed to do all of the things in the job description of a sales representative, but I was not able to make a commission on any sales. That did not deter me from going above and beyond, talking to customers and processing orders. I even pulled people over as they were walking by to ask them about their phone services to possibly get a sale. I was performing so well that other T-Mobile locations wanted me to work on their teams. During this personal discovery crusade, I began to read. I read books like Secrets to Closing the Sale by Zig Ziglar and Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. These books helped me reprioritize working for money versus working for growth. And because I was now working to grow, I did not mind giving away my commission in exchange for challenging myself to be the best sales representative T-Mobile had ever seen. Then I quit. One day in the kiosk, I was pulling people over and having conversations about their cell phone plans in hopes that we would switch them to T-Mobile. I sparked a conversation with my soon-to-be mentor, Chevroy Green. He saw something in me and offered me $14 an hour, plus commission, while I had only been making $8.25 an hour for the past month, to get involved in what he called a management and training program. To be honest, I didn't really feel like I quit, but rather, I gave myself a raise. Chevy told me to read Rich Dad, Poor Dad and meet him at Costco the next day. He explained to me that we would be representing DirecTV inside of Costco. He would train me on leading a team of sales representatives as this program was rapidly growing and needed more owners. An owner was the holder of an independent contract with a company called Smart Circle. The owners would be allowed to hire, train, manage a sales team for DirecTV. In other words, I would low-key be running my own business. I called my boy Josh to tell him the exciting news and low-key get validation on whether or not I was making the right move. Not long after that, I pivoted from T-Mobile and took the job with Chevy. And I did this on the very day I was set to become commissionable. Of all days. From employee to entrepreneur. Over the next 5 months, I developed myself as a leader in the organization, and as my mentality shifted from employee to entrepreneur, I was earning the opportunity to lead my own operation. Then the day came. An office opened in the Pacific Northwest, and Chevy had a guy trained and ready to go. That guy was me. I received a call from Chevy. "We have an opening in Idaho. Are you going or not?" he asked. Chevy wanted me to pack up my entire life and be on the road by the weekend. I hesitated. He reluctantly gave the opportunity to one of my colleagues. But Chevy did not want to send him. He was not ready. I was. When Chevy realized his selection was not the best man for the job, he rescinded his offer and offered me the position again. This time, I had to decide immediately. I called my girlfriend at the time to tell her the news. I gave her little room to disapprove of my decision, as I had already decided to take the opportunity. She was not too happy about that, and I found out the hard way. I phoned my dad. Hey, Dad, I got this amazing opportunity to start my own business in Idaho. I have to leave in 3 days. Yeah, whatever, he scoffed. He didn't believe me, that is, until he saw my life packed away in my 2000 Chevy Malibu. It took me 4 days to drive from Plainfield, New Jersey to Nampa, Idaho, which was an entire adventure in itself. But I'll save that for the next book. Taking this opportunity meant that I had a chance to lead a life of freedom, choice, and inspiration. I learned so much during the year I was there. I learned about running an organization, from managing a team to managing the bank accounts, and none of it would have happened had I not had the guts to take the opportunity. Chapter 4: Have the guts to leave the opportunity. In a world of opportunities, it is important to know which ones are for you and which ones are not. To identify this difference, you must first know what it is you truly want and what it is that you don't want. Without this knowledge, it is both more challenging for you to align with things that you are truly meant for and difficult for you to leave the opportunities that are not. The ability to find opportunities that pique your interest is one thing, and being able to leave opportunities that are no longer in line with your overall goals are crucial skills needed to find your personal success. Every day, people take jobs for the money with little to no consideration for their purpose. Often, when they uncover that they have been living outside of their calling, it becomes more difficult for them to pivot towards their passion, having grown a strong dependency on the routines and habits they have become accustomed to. It is crucial to be able to prioritize your purpose when you're looking to live a life of fulfillment. In 2014, I started my first business. It was in a new town and state far from home. No one understood what I was doing, but I knew I was called to make a major impact. As I saw it, to receive different results, I needed to do things differently than what I saw other people around me doing. As it is to be expected, the drastic move I made to relocate to Nampa, Idaho was accompanied by a drastic lesson that I'll never forget. As a highly motivated and fresh entrepreneur, I was set to drive across the country. And when I arrived in Idaho, none of that motivation began to fade. I hit the ground running, secured an apartment, established a relationship with my Costco managers, and got to work generating income for my business. It was not long before I started hiring, training, and building representatives. Everything was great. As time went on, the quality and quantity of my representatives grew, and before I knew it, I had an all-star team that regularly produced at levels of the best teams in the nation. I often treated them to team nights, where we usually went bowling and bonded over pizza. Chevy continued to mentor me and was a huge support to my team. He never hesitated to tell me how proud he was of the work we were doing. He would always joke about how I was making more money than he was. Of course, he wasn't complaining because he received a passive profit from being the one who promoted me. Logistically, everything was going great. I had no idea that there would be another level of development that would take place. Many people talk about IQs and developing their skills, but at that time in my life, I could have used mentoring in mastering my mind. I had no clue that I would be vulnerable and fall into a pit that was the holes of my understanding of myself. Being like many other normal people, I subconsciously associated my value and my worth with external circumstances. I was unaware that I had checklists of things that needed to be in place in my life for me to feel worthy and therefore happy. On that list was sufficient income to take care of myself, a social life that made me feel loved and wanted by my friends as well as family, and a healthy romantic relationship. At the time of moving to Idaho, all three items on my list were checked off. But by month 5 of living there, I realized that these things were not guaranteed and therefore could not be the reasons I considered myself happy. My happiness was based on conditions, and I have learned that conditional happiness is misery. As my emotional experience changed in one of these areas, I noticed that the others would also be impacted. Learning this the hard way made a major impact on me when I saw how I allowed my romantic relationship to affect who I was showing up as in my business. You see, what had happened was I took a relationship that never really developed a strong foundation of trust, gave it a bunch of reasons to never build that trust. Then I made it long distance almost simultaneously. And to add insult to injury, I was also cohabiting a space with an administrator who was a woman. As I look back, this situation had shitstorm written all over it, but I'm always going to choose optimism before pessimism any day. I held on to the relationship not knowing that I was signing up to be constantly proving myself, reassuring my girlfriend that I was loyal. She may not have been able to see it, but I honestly wanted nothing to do with anyone but her. That is, until her constant accusations were enough to begin to shift my energy away from her. I sought and found the togetherness I craved. Well, I thought. After a few drinks and hooking up with someone else, it did not take long for my guilt to eat me alive. At this point, I needed her approval before I could even consider being worth something. My self esteem was gone, and I found myself grasping for anything or anyone to return it. I remember interviewing candidates and training my team by day and arguing at night every night. The loneliness I felt was unbearable, so I reached out to my family, friends, and even my mentor. I did this until even I felt like I was becoming a nuisance. I drank cheap wine, smoked black and milds regularly, while eating my usually chicken flavored ramen noodles. This had nothing to do with being broke. Instead, it was all a result of being undermotivated and overwhelmed. I can recall a multitude of out of control emotional breakdowns that usually lasted all night. One of them resulted me in burning a box of gifts and things I received from her. That was not me. And I knew I was in a place I did not want to be, but I did not know how to elevate myself. It was not long before my terrible habits and self sabotaging mindset trickled over and affected my otherwise healthy business. I noticed a decline in my team's productivity, and my superstars were slowly starting to leave. They knew I was not having fun anymore. I was showing up late for important meetings and energetically disconnecting from them. I do not blame them. By the time I realized I was the problem, it was too late. I understood the power of positive thinking, but I thought it was just something you chose to do. Now I know that 95% of our thoughts are the same thoughts we had the day before, and to change that, I would need to work on my subconscious programming, where I was only struggling to maintain my conscious mind. In desperate need of approval, I began to prioritize my relationship to my business. I decided to buy a plane ticket to New Jersey. I was going to surprise my girlfriend for her birthday, March of 2015. A week after booking the flight and preparing to repair my relationship so that I could be happy again, I realized that I booked the wrong week somehow. I frantically called the airline to have it changed with no luck. I called business associates to see if there was anything they could do, but they had no reason to care. I called my girl to tell her the news and went from feeling bad to unthinkably worse. I broke down in front of my employees. It was at this point that I knew I would not be able to repair the business and cared so much more about my relationship. Unfortunately, my priorities were off because my happiness was dependent on this relationship surviving, and I had not yet been able to identify that fact. I decided I would take my first opportunity to get back home. I took a road trip. A road trip was when an owner in another market needed coverage due to being understaffed. They were a great opportunity to send representatives to different areas of the country to experience the differences and prepare them to eventually take over their own market. This was meant for reps, not owners like me. But I found one in Long Island that was close enough for me to get home, and it would not cost me a dime. I took the opportunity with major intent just to get home. When I arrived, I spent 24 miserable hours over the course of the next 2 days in Costco wanting to be any place but there. I sold nothing. When I finally got the chance, I took the Cadillac Escalade they provided me with and drove to the Bronx to visit my cousin, then to New Jersey, home. Finally, when I went to see my girlfriend, I had the pleasure of being accused to my face, in person. Except at this point, she was right. I had cheated, and I would admit to it. Whoever said the truth will set you free was a genius. After releasing my need for the relationship in exchange for the truth, I also quit the business I found that I was not passionate about. I could finally exhale and begin to heal. I flew back to Idaho just to gather my things, and a week later, I packed my car and drove back to the East. Leaving my previous commitments behind when we were no longer serving each other was the best move I could have made because it opened my mind to what else may be out there for me. While some people will consider this to be a major failure, a waste of time, or a heartbreak for no reason, I cannot think of it any other way than a learning experience. I took this as one of the biggest lessons of my life. Never put the key to your happiness in somebody else's pocket. Making someone else responsible for your happiness is not fair to them or you. You see, that is a responsibility much too big for someone to handle. In fact, most of us struggle to keep ourselves happy while expecting others to do it for us. It is imperative that your commitments hold value. The way to build value in your commitments is by committing only to things that you want to do, not what you feel like you have to do. But not only that, you also want to be comfortable in changing your commitments when your desires change. Why? Because when you commit to something you're not excited about, you cut corners, your effort reduces, and you end up not being as productive as someone who is excited about what the opportunity would be. Integrity goes a long way, but the misconception is that having integrity means that you suffer and struggle through commitments you have made just because you gave somebody your word. In this chapter, I hope you learn it is okay to give them another word. It is over. Integrity is less about keeping your word and more about staying true to you. If you do not fill your cup first, you are powerless to properly serve anyone else. It is important to know when it is time to have the guts to leave the opportunity. Chapter 5. Have the guts to say no to okay. When you ask somebody how they're doing, I'm willing to guess that 90% of the time, you'll hear something like, "Oh, I'm fine," or "I can't complain." That's what we've been programmed to say when we're really stressed out or unhappy in multiple ways. But we don't want to be a complainer and bring down the people around us. We want to be quote unquote honest without sounding happier or less happy than the person we're talking to. Each time we say, "I'm fine," we're settling for neutrality, mediocrity, and a life less than what is possible. I began to say instead, "fantastically well. So good I can't believe it. And there's heaven all around me." What I found is that not only does it change my brain chemistry to see the good all around me, but it also tripped people up hearing something they did not expect to hear. And when it registered, it resulted in a big smile 98% of the time, which made me feel even better and encouraged to keep doing it. I love making people smile. What people say is a result of what people are thinking about. This is an example that shows you most people just want to be okay. They see being happy all the time as depression because they feel optimism is a setup to be let down. This fear-based mindset is what keeps them down and just trying to get by. In this chapter, I hope that you learn the power of affirming your highest desires over your life and stop settling for okay. Why you should say no to okay. You deserve the best that life has to offer. If you can see it in your mind, you can hold it in your hand. If you're bold enough to believe that, it's a guarantee. When we accept less than we deserve, we sacrifice the fulfillment that comes along with achieving our highest good. The peace and awareness that comes with being your best self and living your best life is invaluable and should not be sacrificed for anything. In fact, when you live your life to the absolute best of your ability, not only will you be happier, but so will the people closest to you. They will benefit from the joy that you generate, which will inspire them to live their best lives that will reciprocate that energy back to you. Why should you say no to okay? Because when you accept it, you subconsciously tell yourself that it's okay not to have what you want, no matter how it makes you feel. Saying yes to okay is like being a trapeze artist who spends their entire time in the safety net. I spent a lot of time with okay. I worked jobs, persevered through less than ideal situations, and entertained relationships that weren't growing me. Was I happy? Sometimes. Was I miserable? Sometimes. I wouldn't say I led a bad life, but I would say that it was directionless and void of motivation and drive. When okay and fine were acceptable to me, I found myself just existing instead of living on purpose, and that was not okay. When I changed my mind, everything else changed. Was the shift easy? I think so. It was really simple, although it did take some time. I had to change my thinking, my language, and subsequently my entire outlook on life. What was most important in the process was why I was doing it: to live the happiest, most fulfilled life that I could. When I moved back to New Jersey from Idaho, I got a job. That job had all the benefits we look for, all of the paid time off, the vacation time. It's full time plus overtime available. I was well paid, and most people would consider it to be better than okay. But being an entrepreneur at heart, it turned out to be okay at best and meaningless monkey work most of the time. I found myself dreading going into work, not finding adequate time to regain my sense of self. I became so desperate to have an identity and social life outside of work. So I did what most people do. I went out. I was on every dating app available and spending my good pay on looking for a connection. It's like everything I gained from working this job, I was sacrificing a vital part of myself that I sought vehemently in the remaining time I had before I needed to drag myself into work again. This attitude either needed to change or I needed to find something else to do. After a year of working at that job, it was evident that I was not where I belonged. I had talent in sales, but I felt like I was repeating the same sales lessons I had already mastered elsewhere. I was not motivated for a promotion or any of the prizes they would dangle in front of our faces. The way I saw it, if I was doing something I actually enjoyed, I would make more than enough money to buy those trips and gadgets for myself. I wouldn't need to fill my boss's expectation or request permission to take vacation. In fact, if I was doing something that I loved, I wouldn't need a vacation at all. I was completely detached from the operation and frankly, did not care. My supervisors would regularly pull me off the phone to review my progress. And when asked why I did or didn't do something, I came up with an answer on the spot. That was until a simple shrug became my go-to. It wasn't long before this shoulder shrug game turned into a serious issue, not only for me, but for the organization as a whole. And I don't know if I should include this, but here it goes. My supervisor pulls me into her office. Talmadge, write an email explaining that your progress won't improve, she whispered to me. This way, she could fire me, and I'd still be in the clear to receive unemployment. At first, I hesitated. The entire thing seemed really shady and too good to be true. Plus, I have this thing about giving up. I'm no quitter. I don't give up, I thought. So I forced myself to continue working at a job I didn't want for another week. I soon realized that no one was benefiting from me being there, and eventually they'd fire me anyway. So I thought it'd be better for me to leave on my terms and take the deal my supervisor had offered. At least I'd have something to fall back on, rather than being blindsided and desperate for income. I sent the email. Hello, supervisor. I don't see my performance improving anytime soon. I'm out of here. And worked for 2 more miserably long weeks before they'd finally pull the trigger. When my supervisor's boss finally pulled me off the phone, my face lit up with excitement. I knew exactly what was about to go down. They brought me into the room and they closed the door. There were 2 higher-ups sitting in front of me. They broke the news of my termination in a way that seemed as if they were anticipating a mental breakdown. And they seemed confused at how gleefully cooperative I was with the process. This was one of the best days of my life. I smiled from cheek to cheek as I cleared my desk and said my goodbyes to my favorite coworkers. Really, it was just Josh. I'm out this bitch, nigga, I'm out! Along with a few celebratory screeches, and I left. The moment I left, I felt a world of opportunity open up to me. I called my mom and I told her the good news. Then I called my dad. I remember speaking to him about doing something meaningful with my life, although I didn't know just what it was yet. All I knew was now I had 6 months to explore my interests. In the next 2 months, I spent recovering from my job. I partied when I wanted, slept when I wanted, and I expressed my release from that corporate dungeon. But knowing my unemployment insurance wouldn't last forever, I eventually decided to commit to expanding my mind. I began to spend most of my time at YouTube University, where I watched countless videos by Ralph Smart, Ty Lopez, Preston Smiles, Leo from actualize.org, and many other mentality coaches. I even began to watch documentaries like Zeitgeist, The Secret, and Forks Over Knives. I will say, the content I consumed during that time has influenced me more than anything else in my entire life. I learned how to operate internally. I learned about society and the universe. It was great. When I began watching Ty Lopez and other business-focused content, I started to think about what business I was going to start. This wouldn't be my first time running a business, as I've already spoken about my Idaho adventure. But this would be my first time running a business that was actually my own idea. The first time I ran a business, I took an opportunity. This time, I created my own. I decided, since I was on social media anyway and considered myself technologically adept, that I would start a social media marketing agency, Yellow Brick Marketing. I used my existing corporation built from my Idaho adventures and would begin to invest in courses that would teach me how to make this a profitable business. I became a certified social media marketer through Ty Lopez's SMMA program, and I was very proud. But the 6 months were coming to an end, and I had not generated any income from what I was learning yet. So I began to look for jobs again. One interview I took was with a well-known bank. I had a fraternity brother that worked there, and I got his recommendation, so I felt like a shoo-in. I had never worked in finance before, so I was very excited to try something new and possibly find something that would spark my interest. So here I am on interview day, dressed in my best suit, carrying all of my customer service awards and accolades. I even tailored my resume to highlight my managerial skills as a business owner. I did everything you should do when aiming to ace an interview. Mr. Spicer, we love you as a candidate, but I'm afraid that you are far too qualified, said the interviewer. And that's the moment something in my brain clicked. I heard a voice that said, "You know what, T Spice? You are overqualified. Not just for this job, but for any job." From that day on, I stopped looking for jobs and decided to create my own wealth my way. Before I knew it, Tyra introduced me to the world of being a brand ambassador. Summer 2017, Tyra and I were planning a trip to Louisiana. I was finally going to meet her family. She had called me one day to tell me a company she had been working with since she was in college had called her with a job for the Essence Festival in New Orleans. I didn't really know what the Essence Festival was, but I knew everyone was talking about it and we would be in Louisiana during that time. I actually hadn't heard of brand ambassador work either, and not many people really know what it is. But in a nutshell, a brand ambassador takes on a temporary work as an independent contractor to represent big brands like Coca-Cola, AT&T, Sprite, and Metro by T-Mobile at pop-up events and concerts like the Essence Festival. She'd asked me if I'd like to be put on the team, and my reply was, of course. We showed up early in the morning at the convention center in New Orleans, and the morning was very slow. But as soon as I saw the crowds rush in as they opened the doors to the public, I knew this was going to be a little different than what I'm used to. I was representing Coca-Cola at their booth, and my responsibilities shifted from line management for the photo booth to free sample distribution and distribution of the Coca-Cola merchandise. I did this all while surrounded by A-list entertainers and personalities. Plus, the DJ was on point. You can say I danced my way through my first 12-hour shift. I was in complete disbelief that I could make $30 an hour by partying, handing out swag, and watching celebrities speak. My first brand ambassador gig confirmed that I would never look for a 9 to 5 again. This was the beginning of me taking back control over my own time and doing things that I enjoyed rather than working just for money. Becoming a brand ambassador was a great move, and I realized that I probably wouldn't have been open to making this move if I didn't have the guts to say no to okay. Chapter 6. Have the guts to choose your environment. Too often, we feel compelled to stay where we've laid roots. In this chapter, you'll find out that you're not a tree. You can leave and travel wherever your heart desires. Not that you have to, but you should. Even if only for a little while. Moving away from your hometown grows you through new uncomfortable experiences and people you come into contact with. Doing this will exercise your perspective muscle and make it easier for you to see things through the eyes of other people, as you have now lived in more than one environment. You begin to realize that even if you do continue to live in your hometown, you wouldn't need to live the way you were. The new paradigm you receive is something that you can take with you forever. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, by way of Plainfield, New Jersey. While the East Coast is home, I've always been drawn to the idea of sunshine year-round. So I'm not going to give you a laundry list of reasons you should move away from the East Coast, because I was never one to keep a list of complaints or focus on things I was dissatisfied with. My dream, however, was always to be able to skip winter. Blizzards are for the birds, I would say. Year in and year out, you can anticipate freezing cold temperatures and the requirement that you be in the freezing cold, shoveling snow and breaking ice to free your car from its parallel parked prison. Now, I know you may have more commitments to your hometown than I did, and may be more dissatisfied with your life than I was with mine. But from what I have learned, it is imperative to entertain the idea of moving away if you see the benefits outweigh the cost. If you see an open lane, even if you need to create that lane, moving from where you are to where you want to be is important enough to pack your fear in your suitcase and make the move. As you know, I lived in Idaho for a year. I learned a lot and moved back to the East Coast. What you don't know is I had my heart set on eventually moving to California, and my focus began to shift towards it more intensely as time passed back in Jersey. It all started with a pen and paper. I began listing my goals as if they had been accomplished. One of them being, I live in Los Angeles by May 2018. This was the point that the universe and I entered into an agreement, and my dream was set in motion to come true. I was officially on a mission. The decision to write it down and to believe it was already mine was the most effective move I made, because it was that moment that it became real. I was then blessed with the belief that if I worked on mastering myself, I would be able to master my world. So I began to list what I was grateful for and saying affirmations daily. Then I released it into the universe. Once I did that, opportunities began to reveal themselves to me. Not too long after writing it, my new girlfriend Tyra invited me to San Diego. We were there for a week, and on one of our free days, we took a 3-hour bus ride from San Diego to Los Angeles. We spent the day with Atika, my childhood friend, and Doreen, my cousin who I was meeting for the first time. I was sensitive to and aware of omens after reading The Alchemist some years prior, and I considered this trip to be one of them. I knew that being around and or focusing on things that were in line with my goals was a big signal that I was aligning with what I desired. When I compare what I'm seeing to what I think about most often, it's easy to gauge where I'm headed energetically. As a man thinketh, so is he. Proved to be actual factual. I found that even if I hadn't yet manifested what I set out to, the process constantly reminded me that I was aligning and making progress. From seeing Jaguar cars regularly to spending time with very wealthy people and celebrities, I knew I was on the path to my dreams and could not be convinced otherwise. The law of attraction is real, and it works in your life whether you believe in it or you've never even heard of it. After our visit to Los Angeles, I was sure I wanted to live in sunny California, despite not having a clue on how I was going to get there. So, my dream lived on a list and a vision board for a few months. As October 2017 approached, Tyra and I started talking seriously about moving to Cali and made plans to start saving money. She had not been home to Louisiana in over a year at this point and really wanted to go home before moving across the country. When her family offered me a room to stay as well, I was down. I was in a month-to-month agreement with my frat brother, so I was free to move at the end of the month. I moved to New York and stayed with my mother for a month in preparation to fly out to Louisiana. The plan was to live in Louisiana for 3 months, October through December, and move to Los Angeles in time for the new year, 2019. I loved the change of scenery in Louisiana, and being a brand ambassador meant that I could make money from anywhere in the country. When December came, we weren't quite ready to move, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I still wanted to commit to moving to Los Angeles. So, I purchased a ticket back home. I gave myself some time to think, and I decided to purchase a $75 plane ticket to LAX. I knew that one of the tickets would inevitably go to waste. As you may have guessed, I decided to move forward and flew to Los Angeles on February 1st. When Tyra and I touched down, we decided to live in an Airbnb for the first month. That allowed us the time to be in LA to begin work and look for apartments. Having already established brand ambassador relationships, earning money wasn't that much of a challenge. It was really just a matter of staying tuned to our emails for upcoming local work. By March 2018, we secured a space on Kenmore Ave in Koreatown. In March 2019, we did move again, this time to live separately, but it worked out having our own spaces, and it even saved me some moolah. Despite all of my second thoughts, my buying two separate tickets, and any other fear I felt about moving away from home, this move worked out for me. Even with a lack of money, lack of a plan, and lack of a solidified job or home, I never feared for my well-being. Being willing to take the risk of being homeless to live in California, knowing that I, or God, would never allow me to not be okay, and saying, okay, let's do this anyway, is what gave me the ability to pack my fear in my suitcase and have the guts to choose my environment. Chapter 7, have the guts to travel. Do you think people travel as much as they should? As I sit here on my couch asking myself this question, I came to the realization that they don't. The world belongs to those brave enough to get out into it. Anonymous. Watch the news long enough and you'll believe that the world is a scary and dangerous place. Not to say that mainstream media doesn't report on actual events, but they will highlight stories that trigger your emotions and draw you in to watch more of their programming to benefit their advertisers. Most people fall into this trap and are terrified to venture out past whatever geographical boundaries they have set in their own minds. The problem with this is those type of people deprive themselves of the experience that is different cultures, customs, traditions, foods, languages, mannerisms, and the opportunity to adopt new perspectives. If you ask me, that's a crime and a shame. Travel is the antidote to ignorance, and in this chapter you will learn why it is important to have the guts to travel abroad. Before we get started, let's address the excuses people give for not traveling. Number 1, I don't have the money. Traveling is much less expensive than people assume. A quick Google search or a Groupon will show you just how affordable it is to get gone. Number two, I don't have the time. I'll be frank. If you don't have the time to travel, then your job is in the way. It's important to prioritize. You only have one life to live. If you don't have time now, when do you see yourself having time in the future? If the answer is never, then it's time to restructure your life so that you can actually have one. It's not worth the money. Au contraire, mon ami. The number one investment that you can ever make is in your experience. That means bettering yourself through courses, mentors, books, and travel. Investment in travel is an investment in yourself. Number four, I can't travel alone. You came into this world alone, didn't you? I know it may seem scary, but traveling solo can be one of the most rewarding experiences you can have. Sure, your senses may be on high alert, but while alone, you're able to soak in your new surroundings more effectively than you ever could with the distraction that is other people. You can plan excursions for yourself, by yourself, without any interruptions, and you'll be forced to connect with foreigners as they will be essential to you navigating your new terrain. Number five, I have to pay Sally Mae. Don't we all? Let's say you have 24 hours to live. At the end of the day, would you rather have your gravestone say, the person who paid off their student loans, or the person that traveled the world? Now, I'm not saying to ruin your credit score and incur late fees, but I am saying do not let your debt be the reason you never board a jet. Number six, I have small children. If you wait till your kids get older to travel, you'll be wasting some of the most precious years of your life. I saw this family on Instagram that travels the world all while homeschooling their children. They had a love for travel and wanted to make sure their children grew up experiencing other cultures in their raw form. I'm not saying this lifestyle is for everyone. I'm just saying there are options. Plus, there are all types of kid-friendly vacation getaways these days. Traveling with small children can be very fun. I say you give it a try. And number seven, I've never traveled before. Perfect. You're going to get the most bang for your buck. Your first trip is going to be the most impactful. It will be an eye-opening experience. You will see things you've never seen before, meet people you never dreamed of meeting, and take pictures that can't capture the totality of the beauty in this new place. In 2017, I decided that I would visit the most extravagant place on earth, and at the time, that place was home to the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world. At this time, I hadn't traveled anywhere by my own intention. I had been to the Bahamas and Cancun, but those were both gifts from either my family or from my work. This was the first trip I had taken that was planned by me specifically for the experience. For a few years, I had already had my heart set on visiting Dubai, but I had been waiting for the proper finances and company before deciding to commit to going. Coincidentally, this was around the time I started to practice manifestation. So in addition to a new phone, a relocation to California, and a beautiful natural-haired girlfriend, I also manifested a trip to the UAE. After numerous rounds of planning and canceling trips abroad with groups of friends who claimed they were ready to take the trip, I decided I would go alone. I immediately felt an energetic shift that put me closer to my goal than any of my past attempts. Thankfully, when I did that, my best friend Josh committed to taking the trip with me. He also committed to a payment plan to ensure that the trip would happen. Upon leaving the company that I had been working for the past year, I accumulated some funds in my 401k. These were the funds I used to pay for my first international adventure. I found a travel agent by posting on Facebook that I was looking into a trip to Dubai, and she was amazing. She booked the hotel, flights, all of our excursions, and was available for all questions and comments while we were abroad. Dubai was a life-changing experience. The people were very helpful and welcoming. I learned a lot of Arabic, and my friend Josh and I ran into a guy from Ghana that worked at the hotel we were staying in. We had a very long conversation touching base on his life in Dubai and slavery back in Africa. We're actually still friends on Facebook to this day. He married a woman from America and asked Josh and me for pointers. When he was planning his proposal, he messaged me on Facebook asking how he should go about it. I was elated to help a brother out. These are the experiences that matter the most. So, not only was I able to ride the fastest and tallest roller coasters in the world, sandboard in the Abu Dhabi desert, visit Ferrari World, climb to the top of the tallest building in the world, but I was also able to connect with someone from across the globe and foster a relationship that will forever enrich our lives. And none of this would have happened if I did not have the guts to travel abroad. Chapter 8. Have the guts to tell your story. Live out loud. Be yourself. And let people know who you are. People don't tell their stories because they assume there's no value there. People don't tell their stories because they've suppressed certain details about their lives because it is difficult to recall the tough times they've experienced. People don't tell their stories because they believe it is unimpressive and uninteresting. Which one of these have I experienced in my life? All three. I was under the impression that in order to write the book that you're reading, I would need to be an 83-year-old gazillionaire who had stories of his many trips to the African Congo and parasailing across the surface of the moon in his back pocket. I thought, unless I had an extravagant story to tell, this book wouldn't be worth writing or reading. From expressing who I was and what I was thinking, I connected with so many people online. One of those people, Kenny Jones, shifted my perspective. I met Kenny on Facebook. He's an international bestseller for his book, Comeback Season, The Untapped Art of Mastering Your Resilience. He's also a coach who helps authors write their books and become bestsellers. How would your book be written if you died today? He asked me. The answer, of course, is that it wouldn't. Then I started to think of my many unique experiences like living in Idaho, overcoming depression, traveling to Dubai, and moving to California on $1 and a dream. I figured, since every day isn't promised, it would be a shame for me to leave this earth without at least attempting to share my story. In this chapter, I hope to inspire you to do the same. As I write this book, I'm happy to report that the myth that you don't have an interesting story to tell is false. I found that many people took an earnest interest in my perspectives and the value they offered from consistently publishing my thoughts on social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram. In 2017, I began to flood people's timelines with a stream of consciousness that was my thoughts. My motto was, if it crossed my mind, it will cross your timeline. Unfiltered, my many thoughts, whether they be philosophical, inspirational, or just downright silly, were published for the world to see. I experienced a state of flow when I began to broadcast my thoughts in real time. I was in the zone. It felt as if I was already writing a book, except each new post was a different publication. It became think, post, rather than think, talk myself down, and deleting the text. I went through a phase where I wanted to see if my audience really rocked with me or not. A few people said things like, "This is too many posts for me," or "Tal, you're spamming my timeline." But I didn't care. I began to be myself out loud. The engagements I experienced showed me that there were connections to be made from just sharing who I was publicly. Sure, I did piss some people off. Some people unfriended and unfollowed me, and I got in a back and forth a few times. But it was all worth it to develop a deep connection with a collection of digital friends that I call my tribe. I had an opportunity to be who I wanted to be and not just who everyone thought I was. I was finally allowed to create my own persona and not be defined by other people's opinions anymore. I'm a stark believer in your vibe attracts your tribe. If you don't express your vibe, it becomes impossible for you to find your tribe. Some people even try to fake their vibe by pretending they're something that they're not, and end up being surrounded by people who they don't like and frankly don't serve their purpose. Crime and a shame, I say. I've always been one to speak up about what did and didn't make sense to me. To have a perspective and not express it, I believe, was a waste of my ability to think. My father raised me to be seen and not heard. I was expected to do as I was told, regardless of how I felt or what I thought. I understood and obliged to the rule, but I always had a powerful urge to at least have the opportunity to express my side of the story. I mean, knowing that I would comply with his wishes anyway, I felt at the very least entitled to say my piece. So my father and I would have the opportunity to be on the same page. Whether he saw value in my perspective or I would understand the flaws in it, I felt communicating was an effective way to cooperate. Holding this belief caused opposition in my household that was more of a dictatorship and not a democracy, something my father wouldn't let me forget. So why should you tell your story? When you have a dream to fulfill, you will hear you are the result of the 5 people you spend the most time with. One of the most burning questions I had at the start of my journey was, how in the world am I supposed to change my 5 closest friends when I don't feel like I chose the ones I have now? The answer, I discovered, was showing up as who I was and who I wanted to be and being as public about it as I possibly could. By telling my story, I became more of myself through like-minded individuals I found myself surrounded by. And after I moved to California, I was blown away by the number of people I met who were transplants and moved to California as I did. Many of them are creators, like actors and artists. Some are entrepreneurs. I began to notice the options for my pool of friends had made a dramatic shift. As time went on, shifts in my circle occurred simultaneously with shifts in my thinking. Each shift was a step up in my conversations and in what was possible. The closer I came to people that I could help and could also help me, gave me access to the resources in their skill set and in their network. Once I shifted my frequency and became authentically me, the rest seemed to take care of itself. They say everyone is 3 degrees of separation from everyone else on Earth. In 2020, with the use of technology, it may be more like 1 or 2 degrees separated. So how do you upgrade your circle of friends? You must learn to have the guts to tell your story. Chapter 9. Have the guts to make money your way. 51% of Americans aren't engaged in their jobs. That means they feel no connection to what they do for work, and they're merely working to pay the bills. Their goals are the bare minimum, and so is their work ethic, drive, and happiness. They experience life by just going through the motions, but it gets worse. Another 16% of Americans are actively disengaged. These Americans are dissatisfied with their work environment. They have no goals of progression, dislike management, and constantly complain, which in turn drains the morale of the workplace as a whole. Maybe you know a person like this. Maybe you are a person like this. But why do people stay in situations they know aren't ideal? I found that most people feel as though they have no choice in the matter. They have bills to pay, kids to feed, and other responsibilities to tend to on a daily basis. And being unemployed simply isn't an option. So they become slaves to their employer and settle for okay. These situations don't benefit the employee or the employer as they aren't sustainable strategies for long-term success. In this chapter, you will learn that you do have a choice, regardless of your situation. Knowing this will empower you to live in a meaningful way, even if you decide to stay with your current source of income. Realizing that you indeed have a choice is the first step to weighing the pros and the cons of your situation. Before making this realization, many people accept the situation as it is what it is. They never get around to putting energy into their pros because it's the cons that grab their attention. But when you finally decide that you do have a choice, you will give yourself the opportunity to appreciate your current situation a little bit more. You will also be blessed with the realization that other options exist. The myth, you're either employed or broke, dies here. In 2020, there are countless ways to earn substantial income by doing what you love, which opposes the notion that your job is the only viable option for income. Since the introduction of the internet and its maturity, the self employed community has been flourishing. More people work from home than ever before and live happily, fulfilled lives full of meaning and purpose. So, the question has shifted from what opportunities are there to what opportunities are you looking for and what opportunities do you want to create? When you give birth to a brain baby in the form of a business, you feel you have a personal stake in its success. Your business's success may represent your success. When this happens, your drive, motivation, and inspiration get its time to show itself and fill you with the essence of life. Some jobs drain from the souls of their employees. Making money your way is less about making money and more about creating something you can call your own and be proud of because of the impact it has on the world around you. Transitioning from the corporate world through becoming a brand ambassador has been very exciting. But I eventually arrived at a point where I realized good isn't great. Sure, I essentially worked on my own schedule at fun events and made people smile while being a brand ambassador. But it was time to commit to what I was called to do: inspire. I'm on a mission to inspire 1 million people to have the guts to follow their guts. And it was time to have the faith that will allow my passion to create my path. I decided I was no longer doing things for money that had nothing to do with my purpose or passion. It was a sink or swim move for me. Best believe, it caused me to start a mean breaststroke. In 1 month's time, I launched a pre-order for this book and a 90-day accountability bootcamp, and also secured an apprenticeship at Wealthy Minds with Billionaire PA. All three of these decisions turned out to be major home runs. This book got 50 plus pre-orders in 1 week's time and generated well over $1,000 in total revenue. As I checked my account to see the revenue, I felt overwhelmed with support. I knew I was on the right path. My coaching program, Get the Gist, overshot capacity by 3 people. I was also able to generate income and make connections through Wealthy Minds. After all of this, I couldn't understand why I hesitated in the first place. I felt fulfilled and validated in my notion that I should commit 100% to make money my way. It's like I became a new person overnight. For what I thought what was possible became what I knew what was possible. I learned the power of making a decision was far more powerful than any excuse you could come up with. If you had enough confidence to decide what it's going to be, what you're going to do, and that nothing is going to stop you, the universe would get out of your way. It's almost like magic until you understand the metaphysical science behind it all. If you've ever read a book on generating wealth, you'll understand how thoughts are things. I also learned what you're seeking is also seeking you. And when it's time, you better be ready to make the move. I hope my experience dispels some of the fear or apprehension you have towards starting your business and offering value to the market in your own special way. For when you do, you give yourself the opportunity of self-actualization and the opportunity to live life on your terms instead of being dragged around and constantly victimized by your circumstances. If you've made it this far and you have a dream that's bigger than your job, it's time to have the guts to follow your guts. Love, love. Bonus chapter. Have the guts to say thank you. The second you start to appreciate what you have is the second you will have more to appreciate. When I learned this and put it into practice, my life changed for the better. I began to show appreciation at every opportunity that I had, and slowly but surely my experiences became more and more fulfilling and valuable. Gratitude has been my secret weapon when it comes to being a joyous person, and I hope that I can pass that vibe on to you. I, of course, want to thank you for believing in me, using your hard-earned money to buy this book, supporting my dream to make the world believe in itself again. I hope that I over-delivered on my promise in this book, and with this bonus chapter dedicated to you, the reader. I'm grateful to everyone who has mentored me over the years and all those who have poured into me as I developed as a man. At this moment, I want to invite you to list 10 things that you're grateful for and describe what you will do this year to show that you now have the guts to follow your guts. I want to thank you again for making it through the entirety of this book. And at this moment, I want to give some special shout outs to the Spicers, the Gullies, the Barnes, the Harrises, the Bentons, the Birches, the Morrisons, and the Whites, Sakani Jackson, and AJ Morgan. I want to let you know that anything is possible if you have the guts to follow your guts. Super special thanks to Tyra Morrison, Umoja Mimi Vaughn, Sharif Sowor, and everyone who pre-ordered this book. This would not have been possible without you. I love you all very dearly.